So I'm Elaine Anderson. I'm the presiding officer for the Summit Board, Department of Community Programs Board. I've been on the board for about a year and a half. I've lived in Summit for 13 years. I'm in the Brayton district. I have a son in the middle school. And it's my pleasure to present. And we're appreciative of the opportunity to share with you what we've been working on. The agenda of what we'll go through is one, an overview of who we are. Second, where we put our time and energy. And then third, we'll go a little deeper into the field situation, which is where we have been putting a lot of our discussion time and energy of late. So this is who we are. So first, David was a very good advisor to our board, but now we are very fortunate to have Mary with us, and she is a really highly engaged partner and has been a strong contributor, and we're proud to have her with us. You've got Matt Cohen, who is in the Franklin district, and he is a big lover of kids' sports and the lessons it gives. Billy Gouveia, who will tell you that the best place in the world on a hot night is the Summit Family Aquatic Center. Pam, who led us in the Pledge of Allegiance, is going to be leaving us, and we are very much at a loss because she has been a Summit resident for 25 years, on the board for quite a while, and really steadfast in her approach of everything. Scott Lenz was the presiding officer prior to me. He's got vast experience and really lends a lot of time to Summit, not just on our board, but also on the, he's been on the Summit Junior Baseball and Softball Board. John Petrides and Andy Smith are both Washington school parents, and they are feverish coaches in this town, and occasionally their teams will meet, which I would stay out of that one if I could. Carol Wegman is a senior on our board, and she really does a nice job representing the senior views. She is a yoga devotee, and you might have seen her in the Memorial Day Parade, where she proudly walked with Shark Diddy. And then Shalene Way is last on our board. She is, has a high school daughter and loves being on the sideline of activities, and is always known for bringing loads of snacks. So I think for me, though, my takeaway here and what I hope you get is that it is a really diverse, committed team. They are all here. And with that, we really work hard to try to represent the views of Summit, and not just our own vested interests, but what we think is best for the neighborhood and the council. Now, we would be remiss if we didn't share our partners at DCP, which, as I've worked on this board, I've really come to realize what an asset they are to the community. And in particular, I would call out Judith, Mark, and Jamie, who really go above and beyond to meet the needs of what the community needs, and then clearly what the board needs as well. So the DCP has a mission, vision, and value statement. So the mission is to provide recreational and other related programs and services which meet the community's needs, with a special focus and consideration on seniors and youth. And the vision is to serve as the community's prime source for recreation, youth, and seniors, providing excellent programs, facilities, services, and information. And then they have a host of values behind it of how they operate and what they like to bring out. And I would say that our role in the board is really to partner with the DCP staff to make sure that we're delivering on these things for the community. So when I think about what we tend to do and where we focus our work, I'd put it in a couple of buckets. And the first would be around expanding the thinking. The DCP staff already does a tremendous job of bringing new, invigorating activities to our community. And we really try to help on how can we better them, what else could we do, what are the other opportunities out there. We also try to aid in preparation, so as they're working on something, you know, the community facilities and the rec center renovation is a big one. How can we help with any contingency planning? What are other thoughts of what could go wrong? How are we prepared for that? So how can we complement their thinking? And then I would say the third thing that we've done some effort on this year has really been about succession planning. You know, Judith has been threatening with retirement for a long time, but it appears to really be coming, and it is, you know, no longer a threat, but it is at the end. So how do we make sure that there's a clean succession plan and the community continues to get the great services that they've gotten out of DCP without her at the helm? So in general, I'd say community facilities, the Family Aquatic Center, and the golf course, youth sports, senior programming, field space, and succession planning are where we tend to spend our energy and time. So most recently, we've really taken a deep dive into the field situation. And if you have children who live in Summit or who have played sports in Summit, you are aware, I'm sure, at some point of an issue with a field, and either a shortage of space, a field not being available, and practice being held on a parking lot or having to go to another town because we didn't have something. And this has really been a long-term problem. In 2006, there was a fairly comprehensive recreation master plan done, and it was identified then, and I think it's been exasperated. If you think about expanded seasons, we now have baseball in fall and summer, not just in spring. Soccer, which used to really be a fall sport, now is in spring. We've also seen increased travel teams, which is great. We want to be encouraging all children to be out there and to be playing there, but you have more travel teams, so more time requiring practices plus games. The other increase has been around adult participation. And as we've gone through this work, we've tried to work with the various sports presidents and field advisory, and talking with Alex Cranmore, who runs an adult league, and he also does some pickup games. He's credited social media for some of the increased participation, because he'll do a pickup game and he'll have 24 spots for 2 teams, and he'll have 45 people show up for it because of the mass appeal of social media. So we've been working with all of the sports presidents and field representatives, and I don't know if anyone's walked in, but we definitely here have soccer, lacrosse, baseball, and softball, as well as Dan Healy, who's the athletic director here today, who have been very active with us in this. And when we started it, we said, we want to make sure if we come up with a potential solution that it really meets the needs of what these groups are looking for. So soccer, feels that they need an additional field, with an emphasis on an intermediate or small size field, but if you had a field, they could line it that way. Baseball is looking for an additional T-ball field. They're also looking to have more flexibility in their field. So if you made the dirt bigger, you can then accommodating more ages and more grades because you can move the bases appropriately. I'm getting nods. That one took me a little time to understand, so, okay. Lacrosse, which is heavy in the spring and starts when we still have a lot of snow on the ground, would really need a field with turf and lights, so they have a longer playing time. And then football is the same, of also looking for a field with lights. So we've done quite a bit of brainstorming. We started as the DCP advisory board with the DCP team, and then we expanded it to bring in the sports presidents. We had multiple meetings with them and narrowed them down. And I won't go through all of these ideas, but just a couple to share with you the extremes of what we looked at. So one of the ideas we've talked about is having the lights on 7 days a week at Upper High School. Right now, there's a turf field there. The lights go off at 9 o'clock, and they're only on Monday to Friday night. If you put those lights on Saturday and Sunday night, it would be a fairly easy implementation. It would be fairly low impact to the neighbors. I don't want to say no impact. But it's not going to give you a huge incremental impact, but it would give us a couple more hours where we could have a soccer game in the fall or start something in the spring. We talked about adding an additional T-ball field at Franklin. So for those of you who know Franklin, right now there's one baseball field and a big soccer field. If you went to the far corner away from the road and you put another T-ball field in there, you probably couldn't play 2 third or fourth grade games where kids are hitting the ball a little harder, but you could play 2 T-ball games consecutively, right? So it would give you an entirely incremental field, which would give us more space. Mixed impact to the neighbors. They're already having, it's a school, you're already having a lot of weekend activity there. You might see a little bit more of it, but a little bit of space. Then we looked at really big, more outlandish ideas, but saying we're going to put everything out there. What if we put a field on the rooftop of the parking garage? So taking a cue from what they do in New York City, right? So it could be a way to give us an incremental field, more space, those things. We also talked about uncharted territories, like could you create a field or a complex at Bryant Park? So we looked at all of these ideas, weighed them on a number of different scales, and then really paid attention to possibility versus probability, right? So could be a possibility that you could put a field on Bryant Park. I think the probability of that happening is very low. So as a collective group, our recommendations are kind of twofold. The first is that a Tatlock redevelopment plan is going to be coming forward and submitted in the, I think what it's called. Thank you, in the capital the fall capital budget recommendation. And in that, we are going to be putting a recommendation to add lights to Investors Field and Upper Tatlock. We're also going to be recommending that we use those lights on Upper High School 7 days a week. In that plan, there's also an acknowledgement for the update for the Anderson Fieldhouse. And I will say this was originally not in the scope of what we were trying to do, but in meeting with the sports president, there was so much passion about that being an underused space for us and an opportunity to do more with that and take advantage of it. But it would require some cleanup. For additional impact, we're also going to be recommending that we upgrade the Franklin Field and the baseball backstop there. So it's not about adding another T-ball field, but rather really the safety of that facility. There was some issues with baseball there last year, and the field is one of the weaker ones of the fields we play in. So there was a real concern for some safety. Regarding finding a new T-ball field, our recommendation is that we add it into what is fondly called the cow pasture. So that's the space behind Investors Field. So create a T-ball field there. And then also explore water service at Lincoln, which would let you take better care of that field, the baseball field there, and then get a little bit more use out of it. The other 2 points are to facilitate the assessment to move the K-9 to create space at Glenside. So right now, there's the Union County space just behind it. We don't believe we could develop fields on it, but potentially you could put K-9 there, and that would give you more room to do something more permanent in Glenside. And then last, and I know you all are acutely aware and involved with this, is the Transfer Station Development Task Force, so we will continue to support and engage with that. So the next steps there are to include those ideas in the fall capital budget recommendation, obviously secure community feedback behind these, and taking a nod from the DCP, share the fun.
Thank you, Elaine. Thanks very much, and thank you for all the folks from your board for coming tonight. This is a great turnout. It shows the commitment of these folks coming out, and also the folks who are involved with the different sports teams. We'll do this, if folks here have some questions or comments or suggestions, do that first, and then if there are folks in the audience who have questions or comments, we'll do that. Okay? Anyone? Sorry, Mike.
Elaine, thank you so much. That was a great presentation, and I know you guys work really hard, and you know, I have a lot of kids who play sports, and I know how it doesn't work without really passionate people who run all the organizations, both at the city level as well as all the private clubs, so thanks for everything that you're doing. Just a couple of questions. I'm just interested when you talk about the Anderson Fieldhouse, because that's come up in some of our capital budget discussions. Could you just be a little more specific around what kind of usage you would envision for that outside of sort of the current locker room usage that it gets now?
So we did not take a deep dive into exactly what we would recommend. In our conversation, there was thoughts around, could you watch films? Could you do some training videos, but better use of the space? You know, should we have a second floor on that building? So it went to a kind of a broad, we were in a brainstorming anything, but there was definitely a lot of passion for both cleaning up that locker room and then also putting some kind of meeting room in there, I think, so you could work with the teams.
Okay, and then the last question would be, have the board done any initial sort of community outreach around some of these proposals, like in particular the ones I know that would certainly have some interest from some different neighborhoods would be the lights on some of the fields?
So we have not done community outreach on them. We've worked with the sports presidents who are certainly community residents and their field representatives who believe that this could make a difference for our community, but we haven't gone to the neighbors. The one thing for the lights for me, because I know that there's been a long history here about turfing some fields and putting lights on those, I do think the light technology has evolved from where it was 10 years ago when there was the last discussion about lighting some of the fields. And the tennis courts at Tatlock are a good example of lights which don't really have any spillover, are direct down, and we haven't had any complaints from the neighbors about those lights since they've gone in.
Okay, great, thank you.
So.
Mary.
Just a compliment. I love serving on this board, and it's been a really fun, I agree with you, it's a really wonderful board. But I also want to compliment you, Elaine, because all the meetings that I've attended and been a part of, what's so impressive is everyone's contribution, everyone's ability to think what will have the least amount of impact, what can we try to squeeze into, you know, our playing fields. How can we, without major construction, without major change, without, you know, trying to do with what we do have. And you know, I do think creative ideas going forward are the way to go, and lighting will be something to really consider in light of the fact that it has changed so much over the past 10 years or 11 years when they were put in. But just thank you all for all your dedication to this board, because it's, I think, a very important one, and our kids all benefit when invested parents come and get involved and have a say. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Marjorie?
I'll second what Mary had to say, and thank you, Elaine, and the entire board. I just had a couple of questions. One was about the Tatlock complex. I saw that there was some discussion about the condition of the track. Is that something that's being discussed in the context of the work at Tatlock?
Yeah, so within the redevelopment plan, there is a recommendation that we also improve the track at Tatlock.
And by improve, you mean replace, or not necessarily?
I have to look to
I
Mark.
don't mean to put you on the spot, I'm sorry.
To replace.
You're not there yet?
To replace, yes, to replace.
Replace, okay. All right, and then the other question was, you mentioned the canine area down at Glenside. I had heard ideas about actually placing another field back there. Is there not space if the canine unit is successfully moved someplace else?
Oh, if the K-9 unit was successfully moved, there could be space at Glenside to put
Okay.
something else there. The K-9 community apparently wants to be very close to the highway, so they can, because they serve all of Union County, so I don't think uprooting them and moving them far would be an option that would be considered, but because there is a space that now is Union County, the thought is they could go right there, and that would open something up at Glenside.
Oh, so they would move to a different Union County facility, or they'd still be on that same property? I'm a little unclear.
Marjorie, or through you, Council President, if I may. So last year or the year before, Mayor Radis and I actually engaged with the Union County Sheriff around that possibility of moving it, and the sheriff was on board to do it. But to what you just said, there's a lot of constraints on where the K-9 unit has to be located, and it's not easy. He went through and did a pretty substantial vetting process to find a space, and was unsuccessful at the time, and now he's no longer the sheriff now. But I think certainly at the time, they were very willing to engage around that process, and maybe that is something certainly from our end, we can re-engage with the sheriff again, the new sheriff, to see if that works, because that's a great spot, and to your point, it's got running water, it's got a gas line, there's a lot of stuff you could do with that if you could find a place to move what's an important part of the safety of our county, which is the K-9 unit, so.
Anyone else here? Okay. I'll open it up for the public. Does anybody from the public have any comments, suggestion, ideas, thoughts, anything? Good. All right. Well, again, thank you, Elaine, for coming in.